we are in the first few weeks of the Trump 2.0. What do you think? What would his 4-year term look like? He seems to be on a mission. So how do you think this is going to shape in the next year and the coming years?
Well, hello everybody. Great to be here. Marhaba. I think we would all like to know what this will look like in 4 years. I've had trouble keeping up with what's happened in the last 20 days. I think he's signed now 60 executive orders in the first 20 days. That's more than Biden signed in the first 100 days. He's trampled all over the US, Mexico, Canada agreement. He has threatened the sovereignty of nations. He has made some jaw-dropping comments about Gaza, and so the list goes on. So just extrapolating from that, I think one of the sort of observations, and I'll go back to a comment that Chrystia Friedland made in an article she wrote to The Economist only a couple of weeks ago, is uncertainty is a feature, not a bug, of the Trump administration. So one of the things we can continue to expect is uncertainty. And those people who say he's a negotiator and this is all a tactical ploy, he is just frightening the world so that we end up somewhere which is a reasonable compromise, I worry that really what he's doing is drawing down on American capital that has been built over almost a century. And that is both moral capital, diplomatic capital, human capital. And so it is going to be interesting to see what happens as sort of the world order we've been used to is shaken up. I think the role of government is to create certainty and stability for its citizens, for businesses, for investment. And it is very hard to see how we do that in the current environment.
So as a follow-up to that, Mr. Frederick, you may have some different views, right? On a positive of Trump 2.0. You think that there is a positive impact on the geopolitics of Trump 2.0 because there were certain things which were set after World War II by the US globally, and probably he's trying to shake those up, including drawing down on some of the aid programs, right? How do you think, overall, you'd have a positive impact of Trump's geopolitical outreach?
So, first, it's important to say that what's in this one man's mind and the decisions he takes could have massive consequences. So let's lay out the global context first, which would have been the same if President Kamala Harris had been elected or if President Trump had been elected. And the global context is a war in Europe. It's the most dangerous moment probably geopolitically in our lifetimes, 2025. You have an intractable war in Europe. You have a ceasefire in the Middle East and some return of hostages, but the tensions are there and they persist. You have tensions with Asia, and you have a contest for the commanding heights of technological change, artificial intelligence, and artificial intelligence is going to be very promising in many respects, but very disruptive in many respects. So a traditional way of looking at geopolitics at this very challenging moment is as a multi-dimensional chessboard for grand masters and great powers to shape things over generations. Donald Trump has tipped over the board, has introduced a new game with different pieces, and he's in a hurry. If you're an optimist, and I've been talking to people around the World Government Summit, and the optimists say we have a chance for global deconfliction that's urgently needed, that he can reach new arrangements with Russia and Ukraine that could bring that war to an end, and potentially create the situation for a sovereign, independent Ukraine, a more secure Ukraine anchored in the West, potentially. These are the optimists. The optimists believe in the Middle East, a new way of thinking could build upon the Abraham Accords. And let's not forget the Abraham Accords were a creation of the first Trump administration. A willingness to look at a region in the new way, working very closely, obviously, with the UAE and with others. And one could build on that to get Saudi normalization with Israel, a new arrangement with the United States between the Saudis that would be a huge breakthrough. And then with China, he could also bring this situation into a new arrangement. So that's the optimists. By looking at things in a new way, by being transactional, non-ideological, pragmatic, and ambitious, he could shift all of this. The pessimists look at what you were talking about, which is second-order effects of too many tariffs, second-order effects of not taking your partnerships and your allies seriously enough. If you empty Gaza, what does that do to Jordan and to Egypt in terms of refugee flows? And so you have both sides happening, but what one has to understand is this man comes into a situation where the world anyway is in a very precarious, but also potentially promising situation, and he's going to have a very big impact. I am more optimistic. One shouldn't forget that the United States has more than 25% of GDP, 27, 28% of GDP, but 70% of equity investments. It still is a place people want to send their children to school. It still is a place where people are sending billions and billions of dollars of investment, particularly around artificial intelligence. But what's true is our allies and our partners want consistency. And they don't just worry about the Trump administration in that respect. They also have seen through the Obama administration and through into the first Trump administration and through into the Biden administration, particularly in this region, they haven't been getting sufficient consistency of purpose from the United States.
As a follow-up, Mr. Kempe, I mean, you know, the biggest challenge, geopolitical challenge, the geoeconomic challenge that the US is facing currently, irrespective of who is the president, is from People's Republic of China. I mean, there are some signals, and these are very nascent, and I also am very curious to understand. Do you think that he could reach a deal with China? Somebody was as some people are mentioning, that raise the tariff in 6 months, reach a deal.
Well, I had a conversation with someone close to President Trump, and he pointed first to the 60% tariff threat, which then was removed. Right. It's now a 10% tariff. The Chinese have responded, calmly to that. He, through executive order, stopped the ban on TikTok for a 75-day review, so that gave that a breather. And so this person said, well, could it be Trump to China like Nixon to China? And he said, well, he likes making deals with big, powerful leaders around the world, and so he would rather make a deal with China than go to war with China, and so that's what he's going to try, and he'll try to make a deal through a mixture of carrots and sticks. And I said, well, who will be Kissinger? And he said, well, Elon Musk would like to be Kissinger. and you can laugh at that, but if you actually look at Musk's connections in China, they're deep. They're profound. And if there's anyone in the Trump circle, and the United States, there's bipartisan consensus on very little in our country, but in terms of being anti-communist China, there's a bipartisan consensus. But I think Musk, with his Tesla plant, with other business interests in China, has really been very forward-leaning in creating better relations with China. And so I think you're certainly going to see a testing of the waters and a potential for better relations, although I would say right now on both sides the situation is fraught. And President Xi Jinping has a vote on this as well. And his actions in the last few years in the region and in the building up of his military are not entirely promising at the moment.
Lara, if I can come to you, on China, the DeepSeek has taken the world by storm, right? I mean, it's just, the stock in the U.S. stock market, the Dow just fell. I mean, what does it mean for the U.S. leadership of artificial intelligence? And we are talking about this on a day when there's artificial intelligence summit is being held in Paris, co-chaired by India and France, where they're trying to look at, a middle path. Neither an U.S. model nor a China-led model. So what does it mean for the U.S. leadership on the artificial intelligence, the DeepSeek in particular? It's a Sputnik moment, as many say.
Yeah, Well, look, I think we've all recognized that AI is going to be a fantastic opportunity, but also comes with the need for governments and society to rethink our rules. The question is whether you want something that powerful to sit in the hands of any country, right? And it is, I think, healthy to have a number of versions of AI, although I'm sure some people would dispute that. And I think competition is generally a good thing, and as we have seen with DeepSeek, it is the fact that China had to create something under more difficult circumstances that led it to create a model which is more efficient. You can then argue about how it was created and where the IP came from, but I would argue you could argue about that in the core models. The question, I think, that was really interested in the plenary session this morning with Mr. Lee from Baidu is the discussion around where will returns flow, right? At the moment, as he's described, all the returns flow to the chip makers, to the infrastructure providers, and there's very little to show for it on the application layer. With a model like DeepSeek, with completely different economics, the question is whether businesses and governments could apply those models with different economics to solve big societal problems and indeed small business problems, and whether that actually, in fact, is a positive thing for the world as a whole. So more competition, more variation, less concentration of power, in my view, is probably healthier for how this develops. It's an incredibly powerful technology, and you probably don't want just one person ruling it.
So, would you say this would be a Manhattan Project for steroids? Or?
Yeah, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor for President Biden, in an interview he did with Axios, said this race for the commanding heights of artificial intelligence would make the Manhattan Project look like a small thing. But that makes it sound like more of a physics problem, which was the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project obviously created a nuclear weapon, and you can imagine how the world would have been different if the Third Reich had got there first. And so on the one hand, you want to get to the commanding heights. On the other hand, it's collaborative. Tens of billions of dollars are being invested by the UAE and others in artificial intelligence with U.S. partners. The G42 Microsoft partnership is a great model of things going forward. But the difference between Manhattan Project and artificial intelligence is at that point things were coming from the government, and then and also the internet was a project that then went to the private sector. The breakthroughs in artificial intelligence are coming from the private sector. Right. And then the government has to figure out what are the consequences of that. I think what we have to understand is it's one of the most disruptive, promising, and perilous technologies the world has ever seen. And so government will have to intervene and set standards and ensure that we tap this for the best outcomes and then prevent the worst outcomes. We've learned through the internet that a digital divide can make richer people richer and poorer people poorer. And the question is, have we learned enough so that the benefits of artificial intelligence can be more equally spread? Because if they are, then the dissemination of education, of healthcare, of so many other good things could be accelerated. On the other hand, there's also dark sides that can be accelerated as well. So I think we're in. I always tell my friends, if in the next 4 years, everyone seems to be talking about President Trump, but artificial intelligence is going to have a hell of a lot more impact on where the world is 4 years from now than Donald Trump will have.
Thank you. One quick last. Lara, what do you think is the Global South heading among this competition between two big powers?
Well, look, I think it's undisputable that the Global South is going to become more important. I think the latest stat is 18% of the world GDP concentrated in 133 countries, but 30% of trade and 62% of the population. So the one undisputable thing is that trade between the Global South, the importance of the Global South is only going to rise. There's probably too little being spoken at this conference and everywhere else about that, and so I think I'm optimistic. If you're sitting in the global south, the future is probably looking quite bright.
Thank you. I'm afraid we have run out of time. I mean, it was a brilliant session, and I mean, to discuss President Trump and China, I think even 3 days are not enough. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.